let's get going. And then we can. Okay, right. Everybody can see what's going on here. Okay, yeah. So let me just leave it like this, so I know where we are. Okay, but anyway, so the next thing that we are really trying to kind of get into or start to engage on is this thing of standard costing for a manufacturing company. Okay, like I told you guys in 2A, in finance, I don't know about third year, but definitely in second year, we are focused on manufacturing, a manufacturing company. All right, it's tailored to speak to that. Okay, and we have an actual costing system, all right, which makes use of actual costs, okay, incurred for all products, including direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overheads, okay? Actual costing systems are often preferred since they tend to produce unit costs that, sorry, are often not preferred. They're not preferred. All right, because the prices actually fluctuate. The unit prices fluctuate, okay, from period to period, or even from batch to batch. Okay, so then you've got fluctuations in your costing. 1 minute, it's costing us, let's say 5,000 to do a batch within the same period, or periods that are not too far off. Okay, and then the next minute, it's costing you 5.3, so people prefer to use what we call standard costing, all right, or normal costing. A normal costing system makes use of actual costs for direct material and direct labor and normal costs for manufacturing overheads using predetermined rates. Okay, funny enough, this is actually not new to you guys. We were actually doing this in 2A when we would look at the application rate. That's the predetermined rate that they're talking about here, okay? So here it goes on to say predetermined manufacturing overhead rates are assigned to costing centers based on the predetermined manufacturing overhead application rate. Sounding familiar? And the activity of the cost center. Okay, now how? The predetermined manufacturing overhead rate is calculated by dividing, wait for it, budgeted annual factory overhead costs by budgeted volume. Every time that we were calculating an application rate, we were always dividing by these two variables, okay? The budgeted factory overhead by the volume, right? Based on the base that we were using, okay? Or activity levels, okay? So that is that. Let's move on. A standard costing system uses standard costs or rates and quantities for all three components of manufacturing costs: direct material, direct labor, and then obviously manufacturing overhead. Okay. Standard costs are predetermined, budgeted target costs that the enterprise should attain. The purpose of a system of standard costing is therefore to provide management with relevant information by means of cost reports. Okay. Standard costs are predetermined costs or target costs that should be incurred under efficient operating conditions. Okay. So they should be fair estimates. All right. We know they're not exact. We know they might not be 100% accurate, okay, but they should be within reasonable means, okay. In a standard costing system, actual costs are measured against the predetermined standard costs to establish variances. So everything that I've actually been going through is to get to this point, to justify, to really explain why do we then analyze variances, okay? Because we would have probably used standard costing system, right, during the course of the year, like we saw in Finance 2A. And then only at the end, we begin to analyze to say, but wait, that budget that we put together for our costing, how far off was it from what actually happened? Okay, right. So here they're just reiterating more on the same thing. Very important. The success of a standard costing system depends on setting accurate and reliable standards. Okay, so in other words, having a variance that's not too far off. The closer it is to reality, the more successful we can determine our standard costing system. Okay, I will not touch on all of these. I think some of these things we will see practically. Then there, a variance is the difference between the standard cost and the actual cost of producing a product. Okay, and then here they begin to touch on all the variances that we have. So we have the material price. In fact, let me not go through them here because we're going to go through them with the formulas. Okay. Yeah, I don't think we need to go through this. I think as we look at the formulas, it will make more sense. Okay. So material issue price variance. Okay, so here this variance occurs when there is a difference between the actual quantity issued, okay, in other words, the actual quantity used at the actual cost, all right, and the actual quantity issued and the standard price. Okay, so standard price is the one that we estimated, all right. So here, what are we actually assessing? We're assessing to see our standard cost, how different was it from our actual cost? Because can you see we used actual quantity in both instances? So the thing that would create variance is obviously your difference between your standard cost and your actual cost. Can you see that? So that is your material prices variance, okay? So these formulas, you must know them. How do you determine which formula you're supposed to determine? Because you will see the names can be quite familiar. It's saying, okay, material, so we're definitely looking at quantity, okay? Then prices, okay? So then it must be the actual price and the standard price that we are concerned with. Material price variances, okay? Let's look at the next one. Is this still material price variance? Yes, it is. Maybe we duplicated two types of material price variance. Okay, so the first one actually was material issue price variance, issue. Okay, so here, material price variance. The variance occurs when the actual price and the standard price of the material differ. Okay. I think maybe there was a duplication there, maybe. Okay. All right, yeah, that's looking like the same formula. So I think don't jot those formulas down. We'll see the formulas just now. Okay. So here now they're talking to when something is favorable and when it's unfavorable. Okay. So it's gonna be unfavorable when obviously we have spent more than we anticipated. It's gonna be favorable when we've actually spent less than what we anticipated. When I say anticipated, I'm also saying what we've budgeted. Okay. So I think I'm just going to leave it at that. Here then they're giving possible cases of what might have happened for it to be unfavorable. So inefficiency, of purchasing department. Okay, that's one example. Then when it's favorable, and as I said, it's favorable when we have actually spent less than what we budgeted. Low quality material was purchased, so cheaper material was purchased. A larger quantities purchased resulting in discounts, bulk buying. Okay, so they're just trying to really contextualize this thing for you. Material quantity variance, okay, is the result of differences between actual amount of material used versus the budgeted. In other words, the standard quantity of material allowed, all right, or that we anticipated that we would use. Okay, sometimes these terms are what actually confuse us at times. So here you can see, what are we assessing? We're assessing what was the actual quantity that we used and what was the budgeted quantity that we anticipated we would use, and then we times that by the standard quantity. Sorry, standard cost. Okay. So again, can you see here we're looking at quantity, and it's in the name, material quantity variance or material usage variances. Okay. So again, I think I duplicated that slide earlier because this should be the second one. Okay. And then again, they're speaking to favorable and unfavorable. What context? Again, you just need to understand that when it comes to costs, it's favorable when what we budgeted, the cost was higher for what we budgeted than what we actually spent. When it comes to us receiving money or in income, if we anticipated that we got 10,000, but we only got 5, that's obviously what? Favorable or unfavorable? It's unfavorable because we made less than what we planned or anticipated. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's all you need to remember. And then obviously, then when looking at the question, they might ask you for potential reasons why you found yourself either in a favorable or unfavorable. So there you just now need to use logic and ask yourself, what type of story would result in us actually having a favorable or unfavorable situation? Then here you've got your total material variances. So here now we are combining the two variances that we spoke about earlier, okay? And then we're saying, what is the difference there, okay? All right, and then now we move on to labor. And with labor, we are doing the exact same thing. We have two variances there. We have labor rate variance, okay? So again, in the name, you can see labor rate. That means what is the variance in terms of the rate that we budgeted and the rate that actually occurred or actually applied in reality. Does that make sense? Then labor efficiency variance. Now here we're saying, okay, we anticipated that we would spend so many hours in order to produce 1 unit of this machinery. Okay, that's a budget, that's a plan, that's an anticipated, right, level of efficiency. Okay, however, in reality, how much time did we spend to actually produce 1 unit? Okay, so here you can see labor rate variance, and again, can you see here, if you take this initial formula here, you see it's the actual rate minus the standard rate times the actual time. Because what are we assessing here? The actual, the difference between the rates, isn't? Okay, are you now getting what I mean when I say the formula to use is in the name? It's making sense, right? Okay, right. So there again, unfavorable and favorable, they're explaining again, when it comes to labor, we want to spend less than what we anticipated. Okay, efficiency, like I was saying, now we're talking about time. And guess what we have here? Again, I'm just going to highlight it quickly. Okay, let me use my pen because there's other things that are popping up. Okay, so there we are, right? And there you see actual time and your budgeted time or anticipated time times your actual rate. Okay. And then and the whole thing here is we want to spend less time in reality than we anticipated. That means that we're actually more efficient than we thought we would be. If we are spending more time in reality than we anticipated, that means we are not being efficient. Can you see how we're now building the whole story? Because obviously, guys, these formulas are not tough. We're then going to ask you to explain. Yeah, but my students, they suffer because they don't start. I'm telling you, students fail this stuff, but I don't understand why. Because if you practice this, collecting your marks. And this is test 1, by the way. Unit 1 and Unit 2 is your test 1. Okay. Right. Total labor variance. Again, we are combining both variances and we're saying, what is the difference here? Okay. Okay. And then we move on to the next category C. I'm looking for where the formulas might be. Okay. So there are your formulas. Okay. 2 types of variable overhead variances. The first one, you've got your variable overhead expenditure variance. Okay. Expenditure variance. Okay. So again, we're looking at how much did we spend. So actual rate minus your standard rate times your actual hours or units. Okay, so the overheads, remember, overheads can come based on hours, can come based on units, all right? So that's the first one. Second one, variable overhead efficiency variance. Okay, efficiency, we're talking about time. Can you see here they say actual hours minus your standard hours times your standard rate. Okay. So you need to choose which formula am I going to use? Which one does my mind easily connect with and is easy to remember? I always preferred where it would then just be times one thing, not having to remember additional stuff like this. That was me. Okay. But yeah, we're not all the same. So feel free to use what best speaks to you. Variable manufacturing overhead variances. If variable overheads are assumed to vary with direct labor hours, the variable overhead efficiency variance is calculated on the basis as the labor efficiency variance. So here, basically, they're just saying, if our manufacturing overhead, remember we said we have different bases. You guys learned this from 2A. Okay, this is why we say, learn this now, because you're going to see it again later. Okay, and this is a typical example. If we struggled with our manufacturing overheads in 2A, then here now when we start to build on the foundation, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. Okay, but yeah, nonetheless, we will come right. Okay, so here we're just saying, if, remember we use an application rate when it comes to our manufacturing overheads, right? So we're saying if that application rate is based on direct labor hours, that means that when looking at our variance for manufacturing overheads, it will be the efficiency variance, the labor efficiency variance. It will be the same. Does that make sense? Okay, so there, just remember, if we get the same, if our base is based on direct labor hours, then it's the same formula for labor efficiency variance. That's all that I'm trying to say. I hope it's sinking. Okay. Right, let's move on. Okay, there again, they're just talking to favorable and unfavorable. Okay. Then we have your fixed manufacturing overhead variance, actual fixed overheads minus your budgeted fixed overheads. Okay, which should be the easiest of them all. Okay, and then next one is fixed overhead volume variance. So already you know, here we're talking about how much did we anticipate the volumes to vary by. Okay, so you have your budgeted fixed overhead minus your standard fixed overhead. Okay. Right. Okay. Again, favorable and unfavorable. Okay, so here you see all that content was just to go through explaining them or getting more of a perception on what we are talking about. But the formulas are all here. Okay, so there you got your material issue price. Okay. Okay, and there again you can see, why did I put this back in there? You can see issue price. Can you see here we're talking about actual cost minus the standard cost. Okay, material purchase price. Okay, again. So I think this is, maybe they are highlighting that this means the exact same thing, or the formula is the same, but what is the difference? Remember I said I duplicated the slide. So it turns out I didn't actually duplicate. Here we're talking about issued price. All right, so in other words, that was used. And then here we're talking about purchased price. Okay? So in other words, what was bought. Because sometimes we can purchase 10,000 worth of inventory, but we only issue how much? 3,000 to be used in the manufacturing process. Does that make sense? So that's what we're actually talking about. Okay, but yeah, again, a quick and easy way could be, this is the same formula. We're just talking about different contexts. We're assessing something different. One, we're talking about issued, how much did we use? One, we're saying how much did we purchase from our creditors or our suppliers? Okay, then obviously there's your material usage. Okay, so there we're talking about volumes. There you can see we're talking about quantity, actual quantity used versus the budgeted quantity that we anticipated for production there. Okay, all right. Anyway, I will not repeat and bore you to death, send you to sleep. But there you go. So that's just to know the last 3 slides, we have the formulas that we need for variances. Okay. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is your learning unit 1 from a theoretical perspective. From a theoretical perspective. Are there any questions? Comments? I think you wanted to say something.
It's quite a big unit.
It is. It is. It is. It is. It is. It is. But I think you guys will find it very easy. Maybe just 1 or 2 things towards the end. Might just, shake you a little bit, but yeah, you should be fine. So guys, for homework, as you pack up, because I know you guys love school. It's just so nice, this thing.